Negative al. Okay, how do you negate volatives? Well, we saw before with the perfect and the imperfect that we negate them with lo. Remember we had lo, which is spelled like this. Lamed, holem, and an aleph. You don't use this with volatives. What you do is you use something called al. And al is, if you notice, you reverse the consonants, just as a way to remember this. Here you have lamed and then aleph, here you have aleph and then lamed. And the vowels are different. You have o and you have a. So al is what we use to negate cohortatives and jussives. And I'll come to imperatives in a second. But cohortatives and jussives are simply negated with this. You put this before the cohortative or the jussive. Very simple. So, something like this, al tifkeda. We know we have a cohortative here. We have the a ending with the plural n of pakad. Now pakad can mean to visit or to appoint. Here, appoint probably makes more sense. Well, actually, who knows with no context, right? Let us not appoint, or let us not visit, something like that. So the al comes before the cohortative. Likewise with the jussive, al yifkod, let him not appoint, or let him not visit, whatever. Again, al is what we use. We don't use lo, we use al, and we have it coming before. Now, when we see al before this form, we know that this here cannot be an imperfect, because imperfects are not negated with al, they're negated with lo. So al helps us to tell us how to translate or how to understand the meaning of this form. If we didn't have it here, there may be some ambiguity. Is this an imperfect? Should it be future, for instance? Or is it a jussive? With this one here, with the cohortative, we usually have the a, and so there isn't really ambiguity there. But with the jussive, there can be. But if you see al, you know you have a jussive over here. Okay? Not an imperfect. Now, what about the imperative? What's the deal with the imperative? Do we use al? Well, the imperative is not negated. And what I mean by this is the form, the imperative form, is not negated. So, instead, so we have like pikod. Okay, this is the form, the imperative, second person volitive. We do not negate this with lo or al. Instead, there are two other constructions that are used, and they're used for two different things. One is used for general prohibitions, and the other for specific prohibitions. General prohibitions meaning it's something like what you have in the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not do something at any time. It's just a general prohibition. Specific prohibitions is don't do it. Don't do it now. Maybe you can do it tomorrow, or maybe you did it in the past, whatever. But right now I'm giving you a command not to do it. So we have two different constructions to express these two types of prohibitions, and it's important to know that to be able to distinguish these two and translate things correctly and understand things correctly. So the general prohibition is expressed with the imperfect plus lo. Okay? Remember I said that the imperfect cannot go with al. If you see al and you see what looks like an imperfect form, you know you have a jussive. Well, you can use the imperfect to express general prohibition, but of course it will take lo. And an example of that is in fact in the Ten Commandments, and this is the classic example because this is thou shalt not murder. Exodus 20 verse 13. Lo tirtzach. So this here is a second person imperfect form with lo in front of it. Now the other form here, the other construction, is for specific prohibition, second person jussive plus al. And again, al goes with jussive, lo goes with the imperfect. Now we have a second person jussive. Remember I talked about this, I gave you a little warning that this was coming. So we have something like this. We have al tismach Yisrael. Now this here looks like the imperfect second person. But we know it isn't. Well, actually, The imperfect has two forms, right? They look the same, either third feminine singular or second masculine singular. Here we have the second masculine singular form, but it's not an imperfect. And we know that because we have al. So even though it's second person, it's still a jussive. And this is, do not rejoice. Do not rejoice, O Israel. Samach is to rejoice. Coming from Hosea 9:11, and this is an example from Seo, page 209. Now, the command here is not, this is not a general prohibition. It wasn't that Israel was never to rejoice. It was, do not rejoice, O Israel, now because of what's going on, because of what you're doing. So that's the difference between specific, immediate prohibition, and a general prohibition. Thou shalt not kill. And if you think thou shalt not for general, for translation for general prohibitions, and do not for a translation for a specific prohibition, maybe that'll help to keep things apart. Okay, one other thing I want to talk about, and that is just a note on na. We had na before. When we use na with the negative, it follows the negator al, not the verb. So we have something like alna novda. Do not let us perish. And this is from Jonah 1:14. So when I talked about na before, I said it comes after the verb, and then it tells you that the verb before it is a volitive, either a jussive, a imperative, or cohortative. I think we had kavotsna, something like that. However you say that, I don't even know anymore. Kavotsna. Kavotsna. Right, because it's a dynamic verb. It's not a stative, not dynamic, so we don't need to, or it's not a stative or a guttural, so we don't need to say kavots, it's kavots. It came here, but when you negate, you put it here. Al na nov da. And this is a cohortative. We have the a ending. We have the plural. It's a bit odd. First aleph has a holum for a prefix vowel, not a hidic, but whatever. So we have two types of prohibitions for second person. We have imperfect plus lo for general prohibition, and we have second person jussive plus al for specific prohibition. And then for cohortatives, go back here, cohortatives and jussives, we simply use al. Al and al. And that's how you negate volitional forms.